breech coat, hat, collar, tie, and everything on. Just snoring away and dozing off there. Just snoring away and dozing off there. Light was on in the chart room. Gibson came, just opened the door and told me this. I said, I must have said all right. There's nothing startling about it.
Your mind was relieved at knowing that this...
Steamer steamed away.
And he was still on the chart room, said he.
Oh, yes.
When Stuart called you in the morning.
Yeah, when Stuart called me.
What
He
did
told me about it. Well, 4:30, I think, between 4 and 5:30. I forget the exact time. But he remarked about, he was told to call me at daylight. He remarked about these signals. I said, what were they? What did he see? I said, he told me, but I thought they were company signals. And I said, he didn't seem to know anything about them. He morsed and didn't get any reply. Well, I said, go along and see what the wireless has got. The wireless had gone dead old about 12:30. So he came running back along this saloon deck and shouted, the Titanic sunk. And I said, well, go back and get her position. And he got it from, I forget the name of the ship, some other ship anyhow. I said, where had he been all night? He'd been asleep. The wireless man to our wireless man, so wireless to him. And he gave him the position that he'd had of where the ship sunk. So we called all hands on deck, put boats out, got the engines moving, and steamed down toward this position, which took us through this belt of ice. We steamed along and we got down to the 2 steamers ahead, principally the foremast there, which turned out to be the Mount Temple. As we were approaching her on the western side of the ice, we saw a large steamer on the eastern side of the ice. As we passed the Mount Temple and saw her name, couldn't be the Carpathia, we saw that, so we turned back through the ice, which wasn't very far to the Carpathia. Pulled up alongside her, I think the rostrum said about 8:30, something 8:20. We got all the news from him and stayed there until he steamed away. And he asked me would I go down and look if I could see any more survivors. So I went down, saw a lot of empty boats, with the exception of one that had luggage in. And after about 10 miles down, 10 miles back, our wireless team hadn't seen anything, was proceeding on the voyage. So we steamed away, and that was the end of it. Threw out to Boston.
And after your Boston arrival, there was the United States inquiry.
Yes.
They
got in the paper from Gill's story that he'd seen all these lights and whatnot, which I don't think for a moment
Who was Gill?
Gill was the assistant document, acting as a greaser. He said he'd seen them, and he got a present of $500, we were told, for saying this. Which I said before, is a great inducement for a man getting £7 a month. It helps your imagination considerably. I never thought he saw it. He might have seen a light or two when he came. He was a customer for these fellows. When they come off watch, they go down below, have a cup of coffee or something, come on deck and sit on the hatch and smoke a cigarette to cool off before they went to bed. And that's when he saw it, whatever it was.
He would be on deck from about 12 to...
He would? Well, probably around 1/4 to 12:30. I didn't think he was there anymore.
And he, you, and the radio officer were the 3 who went to the United States inquiry.
We went to this inquiry.
What was that like?
Oh, it's very bad. Nothing very formal about it. Senator Smith was very polite. And they took me into his private room to start with. When I arrived, and one of the Titanic officers came in, the 4th officer, I forget what his name was, the man who said, well, they asked him what would an iceberg consist of, and he said ice. What was his name?
Boxall?
No, it wasn't Boxall. A man who lived in Wales. Anyhow, he came in and went out after, I think he was asking for some money or something. But then the inquiry came, I left the room and sat round, I was called and sat in a chair close to Smith. Next to me was a lady sketching me, which I was very interested in. I couldn't get a good view of it. But I was answering. I first sat down next to Mr. Who was the managing one? The White Star manager. Anyhow, they told me, they ushered me into this room and told me to go and sit down over there. I sat down to this White Star manager, and next to him was Mr. Ismay. What was his fellow's name? He said to me, hello, he said, are you Lord? I said, yes. He said, I'm so-and-so, manager of the White Star in New York. Shook hands with me, very happy with him. We're quite jovial over the whole thing. He was very nice about it. Mr. Ismay never spoke. He wasn't much of a talker, I don't think. He kept very interested in stuff. Now, what the devil was that fellow's name? Heaven and Lord's. Well, as my own.
No, I don't remember it.
Well, it came out in my evidence, I think. But anyhow, then I was called up, and Smith asked lots of questions. And after a while, he thought that was all he could ask me. I said, well, can I go and say to tomorrow? He said, yes, go. So he sent a clerk came with me, asking me questions all the way down to the station. What they were, I forget, I don't know. What the devil was the name of that manager? A nice man, a very nice man indeed. But we're having quite a confab and all this man never spoke. Well, of course, he was naturally very hurt and upset.
Was this manager the one who spoke about you being made a scapegoat?
Made what?
A scapegoat?
No, I don't remember anyone saying that, did they? No, I don't think he made any comment about it. He might have done. I forget. I know he's a very nice man. I sat with him for about 10 or 15 minutes before Smith came in and took the stand. So, all very nice, accepted my evidence satisfactorily without any comment or criticism. Not like the London one.
You never read the report? You never read the report?
No, I never bothered reading any of them. I didn't read my own evidence. I have it somewhere. Or did you? I give it to you.
The British inquiry?
Yes. The day of my evidence. I give it to you.
Yes.
Oh, I never read it.
Your reception of the British inquiry was rather different.
Oh, yes. No, my opinion was that the British inquiry that both Lord Murphy and Senator and Sir Rufus Isaac had decided before I arrived there that the Californian was the steamer.
Did you?
Quarter to. Be a longer one.
I don't know what that man's name was.
Oh, it's in that video article somewhere.
When you were being cross-examined at the British inquiry, there was a hostile attitude towards you.
Give me that idea that Murray wasn't sympathetic at all. He had quite made up his mind. As he told Groves, didn't he? That was my opinion.
And Groves gave his opinion that the ship scene,
Yes.
which he'd seen for something like half an hour, stopped close
Yes.
to him.
Murray said, get it out of my mind if you can. Then, of course, Rufus Isaac, with his remark about probably not wise to consider why the captain of the Californian didn't come on deck. There's no question raised about that, which ought to have been. Dunlop was there in the court then.
Dunlop was the representative of the...
Leyland Line. No one representing us, the officers.
Not specially under instructions from you. Dunlop was not under instructions.
Any instruction, none whatever. He told me that he represented the Leyland Line.
When was this that he spoke to you? When did he speak to you?
Oh, when we went in, I was with the manager, Mr. Roberts. He joined me there, and he was in the hall, and Dunlop came up, and we were all talking.
But not wholly about the case. Not wholly about the case.
Oh, no. He was telling me that he represented the Leyland Line, and There was someone representing the guild, Holmes his name was. He came up and spoke to me. I'd met him before. He said he was representing the engineers, I understood him to say. But yeah, I don't think he had any connection with the officers. But he was there, and he's dead now, isn't he?
Well, that's Leonard.
Hmm?
Leonard Holmes.
Holmes and
Leonard Holmes.
Hmm?
Leonard Holmes.
I don't know what his name was. There were three names in the firm. And they were your representatives in those days. Couldn't think what the name was. He was quite a nice fellow. If I could do anything else, you let me know.
But nobody came to you after that, did they, and said things are taking a bad turn from your point of view? You better do something about it.
No, I was in Liverpool, visited the office every day, and took my kit out of the Californian and left it on the dock in the superintendent's office.
Did you read the proceedings of the inquiry as they went along?
No, just glanced through them properly, the echo. I got the copy of my own evidence, wrote down somewhere and got it. But that's the only thing I bothered with. My evidence was in. Stewart, Stowe, and Groves were all in that one day. So I got that.
And then the findings came out. And
Well, of course, most people believed it, didn't they? Oh, with men like Lord Mersey rubricized it, and then Groves saying he thought it was the ship. But they never decided what this steamer was that moved away, or how she could move away. And then the Titanic steamer approached them and steamed away. The Californian never moved. That was never raised and moved it at all. That would have cleaned up the whole business if it only gone into that more closely. Do any of these fellows now changed their mind, do you think? Has Groves at all? You can't get under his skin, can you?
well, his opinion is that it was just an opinion he was asked for. He gave his opinion, and that is there.
He won't change his opinion.
He won't say so.
Then you've got Boxhall.
Vauxhall has been given food for thought.
Oldham's after him, isn't he?
Yes. And Sir James Bissett, too. But they are reputedly as elderly as you are, but they seem to lack the recollection of events or the ability to look at it again, particularly with the seamen.
Who else was there in connection with that ship? Did you see anyone? Any other officer? There was another officer, wasn't there? It was Boxhall.
Lightoller.
Lightoller. He's dead now, isn't he?
Did you ever meet him?
Hmm?
Did you ever meet Lightoller?
No. I had a letter from him.
Did many correspond with you?
Who?
Did you write to many of them?
I wrote to Lightoller, and I wrote to skipper, operating man,
Rostron.
Rostron. He was Italian, as a matter of fact. He came from Bolton, so did I. He was at school with my brother. He wrote and asked me, was I in relation to this lord that he was at school with? Of course, he was older than me. And what was the man, second officer of that ship?
The Carpathia?
Okay. No, the Titanic.
Murdoch?
Who?
Murdoch?
No, the man who, second officer, when she was, who gave evidence about it. When the captain came out, he said, I put the helm out of starboard, up to the name. I knew him as a boy. He was apprenticed in a ship called the Kiki, a sailing ship, when I was in Rotterdam in the Navy. He came aboard to see us. I remember him quite well. And the chief officer I knew very well. Wild. But I didn't know any of the others. Wild and nothing with the devil or this sort of thing.
Since 1912, have you met any or many of the people concerned with the...
No, I haven't met anyone. I never approached them. No one ever approached me.
Did you see any of them?
I don't think I ever did.
Groves?
Grove, well, of course, I saw him, and in Sydney. Very short, but I didn't remember it. It's finished. Something like that it did. But of course he was the last man in the world I was thinking of meeting there, coming down Captain of an old tramp. I heard he went back to the P&O. And we never talked. We just chatted on the way ashore or something.
What was that incident?
Hmm?
What was that incident?
We were going ashore. The ships were at anchor waiting for a berth.
It was in Sydney.
In Sydney. And in a small motorboat picking up the skippers and taking them ashore to see the agent. And we went alongside this ship, and I told you his letters all dropped down. He was coming down. He had a packet of letters which all fell, and I picked them up for him out of the water. And he came and sat down with me, and we talked and chatted. Nice weather. Where are you going? How long have you been here? Or something. It never struck me where it grows. Strange, wasn't it? We might have gone further into it, I hadn't noticed. Although I was rather sore about it, I must admit at the time. Why should the junior officer heavens be taken in preference to three senior officers, myself, the chief officer, and the second officer? And they take the third officer's heaven, the junior man of all, as being the infallible man, to make their statement about their judgment. No reason why Groves can have an opinion of his own. I'm not saying anything about that.
But certainly some positive representation of the inquiry would have minimized all this.
Oh, of course it would have. Dunlop had been representing the officers, or if Holmes had been representing the officers, he could have had some say in it, but he wasn't. There was no one representing the officers.
You didn't ask for help from the
No,
didn't
ask anyone. Didn't ask. Our man came up and spoke to me. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know they were being represented by anybody. I left there, I thought no more about it.
The ship that you saw close by wasn't the Titanic. You're quite sure of that.
Oh, absolutely positive it wasn't. It couldn't have been. That steamer we saw steamed away. The Titanic never moved.
Nor did you.
No,
Ship
it's
steamed
me.
the Titanic.
The Titanic saw a steamer move away, which she said was the Californian. It was all bunk. She never moved. How Murphy could ignore that bit of evidence, I don't know, or Isaacs. But they didn't believe our evidence.
They disbelieved.
Murphy certainly didn't believe any positions we gave.
And yet, working from those positions, you got to the position reported by the Titanic, that's where she sank, and you later got to Boston without incident.
Yes.
So your navigation was...
Quite correct. Nothing wrong with our navigation. We never bothered, didn't ask anybody where we were or anything.
In all your career, this would be the only occasion, if Lord Mersey was correct, where your navigation went wildly wrong.
It's the only time. I would never have been master of a ship very long if it had gone wrong. My navigation always turned up correct. That's how I got my extra master's ticket, I suppose. I don't suppose there was a man amongst that crowd who had an extra master's ticket. None of my officers had. And I'm sure old man in the, whatever his name was, I forget names, in the Titanic hadn't. Wilde had, I know that. Chief, the senior officer there, staff commander, I think he was. And probably some of the other officers had, but none of our fellows had.
During the course of the inquiry, a lot of the masters of these transatlantic ships were asked what their practice was when navigating at night with ice reported.
They were asked?
They were asked.
Were they? And what was their opinion?
It varied. But what is your own views on the method of navigation adopted by the captain of the Titanic?
Well, it's rather a difficult thing to answer. Thinking as he was making his course like I was, I should say that I'm surprised he wasn't on the bridge. A steamer going 20 knots an hour and having had ice reported, surrounded by ice all around him, and having had our report sent in that we'd seen the bergs, I should have thought you'd have been on the bridge. On the other hand, some people seem to think that knowing ice was around, he altered his course a couple of points to the south to get clear of it. Well, that's true or not, I don't know. But he was certainly not on the bridge, which is very particular in the White Star Line. There's any risky waters that are in doubtful conditions, they were usually supposed to be on the bridge. He may have had some reason, I don't know, but he wasn't on the bridge. The master of an old tramp was on the bridge. He was on deck from 6 o'clock that morning, fooling around and looking around and getting a bit anxious. And when it came dark, he went on the bridge and stopped her. We had no instructions about staying on the bridge in ice.
So you did everything that they...
I did everything I was supposed to do. There wasn't a thing they could point a finger at me to say I did wrong. My navigation was correct. I reached Boston without the slightest difficulty. We found the position of this ice and broadcast it to everybody. Now, you always was the one that shut up the Titanic inquiry as quickly as possible. It had enough of it.
And there's also the point which I mentioned to you, that provided they could excuse themselves for the loss of life, the rest of the inquiry became a technical one. And
well, proceed.
If they could say that the loss of life wasn't the fault of anyone in the Titanic or the Board of Trade, but was the fault of somebody else, that made the inquiry so much easier, as you say, to push through.
It did. Then you have a nautical advisor to the Board of Trade, and then getting a big salary under, I suppose. An ex-ship master, I take it. I knew him. I met him. I met him up here once in New Brighton. And it was his job to point out to the authorities in the Board of Trade that no ship should go to sea unless she had sufficient boat accommodation to take all her crew and passengers. He was called, I believe, but he wasn't censured in any way at all, not for not giving this advice. Meredith's opinion was, well, this had been carried on so long that he didn't think he was bothering about it. He wasn't looking ahead. If I'd been that fellow, I would have I'd insisted on it or resigned. But Meredith would say, well, you know all about it now that we had a ship lost. But that's the opinion I should have had. Whether I would have expressed it in those days before any big disaster had happened, I don't know. But anybody to think now, the nautical advisor of the Board of Trade never mentioned that and asked them to put more boats on. After the accident, they put them on. We'll run down.
There was quite a bit more on there yet. We got lots of...
Oh, is that the big one? Time passes very quickly, isn't it?
Very quickly indeed.
Are you discussing these matters? Have you ever heard in your travels about among seafaring people any opinions offered as regard this, given about this Titanic inquiry?
The majority of people seem to think that the inquiry findings were correct. And people like Boxall, who are in a position to be quoted as experts, have had to twist the facts to make the story fit. But among the rest of them, if I may take my counsel as a sort of cross-section of them, it's just, first of all, if the thing's raised at all, they think, well, this was proved at the inquiry that the Californian was the ship. We don't know why. We can't imagine the reasons why she didn't do something about it, and they leave it at that. But every practical man with whom I've been able to discuss this at all, and quote, but only one or two of the 8 reasons, really, which prove that the California couldn't have been the ship seen from the Titanic. Any or every one of those have been convinced. So it's a question of education.
They've been convinced that it was not the...
Not the Californian. But you've got to bring the facts to them first. And it's such a complicated case that it's very difficult indeed to find the time and also to be able to talk to them about it without putting them to sleep or...
Well, now, there are two things I've always stressed. The Californian stopped in the ice at 10:20 and her engines never moved. The Titanic came up, stopped. There was nothing in sight when she hit the berg. Nothing by 2 lookout men and 2 expert officers on the bridge. They saw nothing. Well, how would it possibly have been the Californian that they saw? California never moved. This steamer approached them. You don't want any technical advisor to point out that there's not all bumped of it. Now, isn't it? Just those two things would prove to me, and prove to any nautical examiner that the Californian couldn't have been the ship. They proved that she never moved after 10:20, and they proved that the Titanic never saw anything after she hit the berg. And the steamer they saw steamed toward them. Well, damn it, that clears everything, doesn't it?
One would think so.
Clear everything. And if Mersey and his advisors, I don't think he wanted any advisors anyhow. He advised himself. If they'd only just looked at those 3 questions, Titanic stopped, nothing in sight. No, California stopped, nothing in sight. Titanic stopped, nothing in sight. There were 2 lookout men, expert men, specially picked for the job. A steamer approached them, which they say was the California. The California never moved. Doesn't that, those 3 things? I can't. They wanted a goat. That's my opinion. That's what Strong said. They wanted a bloody goat, Lord, and they got you. I went back there in the section about 1913, probably about May or June. And that's when we got that article that you have it in the newspaper.
New Brunswick.
And he said, you've got to write something, Lord. I said, I'm not going to write a damn thing. I'm sick of it. Well, he said, that report will be down here soon and inquire. So he came down and came into Strong's office, and I was there. Well, here's the Lord, he'll tell you all about it. I said, I can't tell you anything more. Well, Strong said, well, now look here, this reporter thought he knew him, of course, in that small American villages. He said, I'll write an article tonight, and I'll let you have it tomorrow. And Lord will agree to it. All right. And he held his hand. I said, I'm not going to shake hands with you. Fellas believe that I'd do a thing like that. So Strong said, don't be a damn fool, Lord. He's only learning this living like you're doing. So what you can do this report that he left. And Strong wrote that article. I never wrote it. It was in that paper. We were leaving that night for Savannah, and he sent it on to Savannah. He said, there's a copy in Savannah, you know, there's more particular there than here. It's a bigger port. So he said, you have something ready, and he had this posted to me.
What was the headline?
Oh, well, one paper was why Captain Lord wasn't a hero. That was, well, that wasn't Strong's headline. It was the editor's headline there. I went to New York half a dozen times. Oh, a dozen times during the war, never mentioned. Never mentioned. I was in New Orleans, a place I've been trading to for years and years, in Leyland's. Received very well by everybody. Hello, Cap, glad to see you back again. Nigger boys on the walk were all yelling to me. But as they said, they wanted a goat. You were the bloody goat. No doubt about it. Why have you ever met any of these people in London who offered a discussion with you about it?
Well, I've never raised it because, as you know, we were keeping this confidential. We didn't want to attract any publicity to you.
Oh.
And I have kept it, except when I've had to discuss it with publishers and solicitors. And I've never had any difficulty in convincing publishers and solicitors that they're touching something pretty dangerous if they stop keeping this legend alive.
They don't want to start anything.
They know they're on a very poor wicket when you begin to look into the fact.
Yes.
Bissett's book is a tissue of nonsense. He talks about the Titanic turning to port, that's presenting her stern to the Californian, which is the only way they can account for the fact that she didn't have the passenger accommodation lights showing. And then 3 paragraphs later, he speaks of her showing both steaming lights and bow light, whatever they may be. What do you mean, just side lights? Yes. So, as I said before with Vauxhall, to make a story out of this, they've got to twist the facts. If you had an opportunity of talking to a mass audience, all of whom were convinced that you're the sort of Lord that was a Lord in a night to remember, what happened to think you were, measuring your words, what would you tell them?
I could tell them what I told you now. I would mention those 3 occasions. I said, how can you prove the California was the ship? You don't need any more. You just can't need any more. Californian stopped, never moved her engines till 4 o'clock, after 4 next morning. Titanic stopped, an hour later, never saw a thing, not a thing in sight when she stopped. 2 lookout men and 2 officers. And later, she saw a steamer approach her. The Californian never moved, never saw any ship there when she stopped, and the Titanic never saw a ship when she stopped. So how could it be the Californian she never moved? They're those 3 things. They don't want any more evidence. You wouldn't think of it, wouldn't you?
If they did want any more evidence, there's plenty of it. For one thing, if you were in the position which Molony said then, navigationally speaking, you would have been 5 or 10 miles north of the Mount Temple.
Yes.
She was in the reported
she
position
was in the position
where the Titanic had sunk. The actual position was being marked by the Carpathia. I think she was actually about a mile to the southward of the wreckage because the boats had pulled towards her. So you would have been 5 to 10 miles north of the Carpathia, and in the middle of the iceberg, the Carpathia had been threading her way through since about 3:30 that morning.
We never saw any. Not after those 5. And when we left the next day, we saw any, never saw any. And we never saw any when I went down that 10 miles of a gully and came back again out in the boats.
You saw no wreckage of some?
None whatever. Only empty lifeboats. They weren't wreckage. They were just passengers had been disembarked from them.
Would you like to meet Bissett or Bissett or Vauxhall or any of those people?
I wouldn't mind meeting them and telling them what I told you. But would it do any good?
No.
I'm sure it wouldn't. Bissett, I don't know. You might convince him. What sort of bloke is he? I don't want to meet him. I don't want to meet any of them.
No, I don't know.
He appeals to you at all?
I haven't read it. The book doesn't.
Oh. I haven't seen his book.
I got a job of trying to point out the errors in it, but there's so many that I haven't had time to do it yet.
Is he strongly anti-Californian?
Oh, yes.
Is it?
Oh, very much. I must come and read you some of the bits sometimes. I must come and read you some of the bits sometimes. And Vauxhall, he's changed his mind quite a bit, I think.
Of course, Lighthorn never did change his mind, did he?
He wrote to you, I believe. You had a letter from him.
I had a letter from him, but that was only, well, that was the time I was ashore before I went to sea again. I asked him and I asked Rostron. Rostron wrote a very nice letter back, gave me all this information, but Lighthorn, I have Lighthorn's letter somewhere in that bundle. I must sort them out someday.
Well, the affidavit letters are all sorted out.
The what?
The affidavit letters are all sorted out and indexed. And they've got all the original ones, the Rostrums.
Ah, you have those, have you?
No, you have.
Have I?
They're all in that big affidavit. They're all stapled together, and they are all indexed. So you can put your finger on any one of them at any time.
But I do not understand where men like Mersey and Isaac, they're not nautical men, but they're nautical advisors. There were 4 men on that bench with them. They were all naval men, I think, unfortunately. Californian stopped. All you've got to do is repeat it. Californian stopped at 10:20. Never moved her engines until after 4 o'clock next morning. Titanic stopped at 11:20, whatever she was. Not a thing in sight. Her lookout men and 2 officers on the bridge say there was nothing in sight. 1 o'clock, they had a steamer steaming towards them. Came close to the boats and then turned round and steamed away. How the devil could that be the Californian? All the evidence proves she never moved. But you don't want those 3 questions answer anybody's criticism. All the trouble is, why did the captain of the California not come on deck and look at those lights? For the simple reason a responsible officer was on the bridge who told him there were not distress rockets. And he was asked where the company signaled, which would lead him to know what I was thinking. And if he'd been in any doubt, he would have called me. But he was not in any doubt. And he was quite satisfied there were not distress signals. He heard no signals, which he would have done and been 7 to 10 miles off, as Murphy said. The explosion leaving the deck, an explosion up in the air, he would have heard them, never a mention of them. And he was quiet. He's quiet, young fellow, and he wouldn't tell the lies. I'm quite sure of that. And he wouldn't exaggerate. The other fellow might, but he wouldn't. But you've got Groves. He wanted publicity. He went to that, he went to the Boston Herald when he arrived in Boston the next voyage when I wasn't there. He refused to see him. As a matter of fact, I knew a man came down and asked me to see me. His name was Endicott, wholesale boot manufacturers in Boston. And he said, I've come down to inquire. I took him into the chart room and they gave him a drink. And I think it was Prohibition days, and he loved it. And to inquire of Mr. If I saw anything of Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, San Francisco or Los Angeles. He said, I've got a wire from their son, want to know if I would go aboard and ask you if you'd heard anything of them. Well, I told him I hadn't. Well, we had a nice chat together. And then a few days after, he came down and told me that he would like me to come to dinner to their place and meet his family, which I did. And then we took me to the theatre. We had a night in the theatre. That was the end. I had a letter from Alfred. And as I was leaving, I saw a fellow coming along the wharf, a big armful of flour and a big box of chocolates. I thought, what the hell is this coming along here? He came aboard, said, hey, Cappy, I've got something for you. I said, all right, bring it aboard. The quartermaster went down and took it. I said, all right, fine. It was from this fellow's mother, this Endicott's mother. Chocolates and flowers, it was all free. I took them home to my wife, of course. But I had a letter from him afterwards. He always said, we'll never believe it was you or anything connected with you in that Titanic disaster. I wrote and told him I was going in this other company. No, I think I had a dirty deal. It all turned out as it happened very well. There's always this stigma. Was Lord to blame or was he not to blame? A responsible officer was on the bridge. If he thought there was any danger or risk or any other ship in trouble, he could quite easily have got me out by coming down. And, as he said, I would have pulled you out if there'd been any trouble. That was his word. Did you think there was any distress rockets about? He said that there had been, I would have pulled you out. The very words he used. Gibson we've never heard of since. I don't know what became of him. Nice boy. He called me all right. I'm not denying that. He called me and I told him, all right, tell the second officer, let me know if he wants anything, something like that, and dozed off again. Well, a damn cold night, and I was in a steam heated room, fully dressed. No wonder I can't go to sleep.
But if there'd been any urgency, you'd have been out like a shot.
Of course I would. When there is question of a salvage, that's what we were looking for all our lives. A
Salvage?
Get a tow, I think it was. That's what the sea officer said. I wonder if some fellow lost his propeller or a rudder or something. I said, go and call the wireless and find out. I met Stuart about 1917 when I was waiting for this new ship. I was home for 2 or 3 months. On pay, all the time. And met him outside the cargo man. I said, good God, that meeting you. Come on, we'll go and have a coffee. We went there and had a coffee and we talked for about 2 hours. And I said, well, because you've been all morning. I told him being with Stuart. Well, I said, what do you think of it? He said, I don't know. He said, I don't think there's any question it wasn't us. He said, but well, what the devil did Stone see? He said, I've never been able to gather together what he did see yet. Well, then I saw later the ship had been sunk and the third officer was down the hold or something at sea doing something, and the ship was torpedoed. And he went down and he gave his name. He said he was an ex-shipmaster out of a job who came with this friend of his, his third officer, just for time. And, well, that was Stuart. I never heard it or anything more of it. But I've never seen any of the other fellows since. Groves I never discussed it. Stone I never saw. The engineers I never saw. And the purser I never saw. And the wireless man I never saw. Not the purser, the wireless man.
This concludes the conversation in February 1961 between Leslie Harrison and Captain Lord.
Titanic struck an iceberg on their maiden voyage across the Atlantic and sank with the loss of 1,500 lives. The Titanic was steaming through the night at full speed when disaster struck. The iceberg held her below the waterline, and both crew and passengers believed the ship unsinkable, and as a result, many passengers refused to get into the boats. The majority stayed on board as the ship settled lower and lower in the water, her lights still blazing. At 2 o'clock in the morning, to the horror of those in the lifeboats, the Titanic slowly tilted up on end and plunged to the bottom. Of the 2,200 passengers and crew, only 712 survived to be picked up by the liner Carpathia, which had steamed to the rescue from 60 miles away. But there was another ship nearer to the Titanic on that night, the Leyland liner Californian, was commanded by Captain Stanley Lord, seen here with his officers. The Californian, it was alleged, stood idly by, within sight of the Titanic as she went down. This is how Lord Mersey, the President of the Court of Inquiry, put it in his report. The Californian should have pushed through the ice to the open waters without any serious risk and come to the assistance of the Titanic. Had she done so, she might have saved many, if not all, the lives that were lost. Today, a half a century later, an attempt is made to clear Captain Lord's name. An article in the Merchant Navy Journal claims that Captain Lord was the victim, and I quote, of the grossest miscarriage of justice in the history of British marine inquiries. The author of the article is Leslie Harrison, the General Secretary of the Mercantile Marine Service Association. Now, Mr. Harrison, your vindication of Captain Lord rests not only on a study of this case, but on a series of conversations that you had with him before he died some 2 months ago. Now, I'd like you to listen again now to one of the questions that you put to him, and to his answer.
And for nearly 50 years, you've had this appalling burden of being publicly branded as the man who let over 1,000 people drown before your eyes.
Yes.
How have you managed to live with that really awful charge?
Well, I knew a good many people didn't think it. Men like Sir John Lackett wouldn't give me command of one of his ships if he thought for one moment that was true. He didn't think it was true, and the man who recommended me to him, Frank Strawn, he certainly didn't think it was true. And the owners of the ship in Liverpool, the management there, never thought for one moment it was true.
Now, Mr. Harrison, it seems to me that answer makes it perfectly clear that Captain Lord didn't suffer professionally. He was given another ship, and I believe that he stayed in the service for the rest of his life until his retirement. Now, what made him reopen this Titanic incident?
The publication of the book A Night to Remember in 1958 and the film, which resurrected the whole business, and also a succession of books and films afterwards, all of which have to confuse this issue, and in some cases have had to write defamatory articles about it.
Now, going back to the original course of inquiry, and I've got a bit of it here, it was clearly established, wasn't it, that rocket signals were seen by the second officer of the Californian, Captain Lord's ship. It was also established that the Titanic fired distress rockets. It was said so. Now, why did the Californian ignore the rockets that it clearly saw?
These apparently came from a small ship, which was within 5 miles of the Californian. And they were confusing signals because at the time they started, this ship began to steam away. The second officer had no reason to believe that a ship which was in distress would steam away.
So not only the Titanic fired rockets, but this other ship fired rockets.
It appears to.
And it's the other ship that you believe were the rockets of this other ship that the Californian saw.
Yes, so there is a possibility that the distant rocket signals might have been seen from about 25 to 30 miles away.
But the second officer of the Californian, the man who saw the rockets, was heard to say at the time, a ship's not going to fire rockets at sea for nothing.
This is when the ship was actually steaming away. It was a comment, but it was one which they didn't follow up.
Another point that emerged in the inquiry, the Californian carried wireless, but the operator was off duty, wasn't he, during the relevant period. Now, if the reason for the rockets seemed obscure, as you say, would it not at least have been very prudent indeed to have opened up the wireless watch, just in case a ship was transmitting a distress signal? As indeed the Titanic was.
Yes, but this ship which was close by did not, in the opinion of those in the Californian, carry radio. She had oil navigation lights. She was a small ship, and in those days, not every ship had radio. And, I say again, she was steaming away.
Now, your whole case, in fact, rests, doesn't it, on the view that it was not the Titanic that the Californian saw, thought that this other ship. Now, what was this other ship?
No one has ever found that out, and in fact, the British Court of Inquiry efforts to trace any other ships were halted because the Leyland line, the owners of the Californian, expressly told their counsel not to pursue such a line of inquiry, might bring criticism on other ship owners.
It seems to me, Mr. Harrison, this is stretching coincidence to extraordinary lengths, isn't it? That there was this other ship there, that this other ship, although it wasn't in distress, had fired signals and so on. Don't you think this is carrying coincidence too far?
No, if the other ship had been in sight of the Californian from such a long time as she actually was, and if the ship had been in fact the Titanic, would she not have gone to the Californian?
Mr. Harrison, I'm sure this is one of those things that's going to be argued about for many a long year to come, like the charge of the White Brigade. Thank you very much indeed.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to Points North, a bit later this week, I'm afraid. Well, now, perhaps the most serious quarrel which has broken out in the north of England since last we met is a quarrel which really began 50 years ago, because it was on April the 10th, 1912, that the Pride of the British Merchant Navy sailed from Southampton Water, and 5 days later was at the bottom of the Atlantic. I mean, of course, the Titanic. But in the subsequent inquiry about what happened, Captain Lord, who was the master of another British ship called the Californian, which was nearby, was severely criticized for not going to the help of the Titanic. Now, Mr. Leslie Harrison, who was the General Secretary of the Mercantile Marine Service Association, which is a sort of trade union for ship's masters, this week split the shipping world wide open with a new defense of Captain Lord. And indeed, it's so much of a split that the president of that same association, Sir Ivan Thompson, has resigned. And I think, gentlemen, it's the first time the two of you come face to face since you resigned. Sir Ivan, why did you resign?
Well, I resigned because I was so shocked when I read that Mr. Harrison was attempting to drag into the Titanic controversy another British ship, the Mount Temple, and another British shipmaster, Captain Moore. There's never been any official criticism of this ship, and I just wonder why he's done it.
And have you granted to your piece not torn, the disclaimer in the forward to a statement which was published expressly states that of the evidence, the Mount Temple navigation cannot be a ship which was at that time thought to be concerned.
Now, how did this ship get involved in this argument at all? Where was this Mount Temple thought to be or might have been at the time?
Well, all I would say is that in my opinion, it's a waste of time to pursue the question of the Mount Temple. Navigation, if she couldn't have been near the Titanic.
But don't ships have logs and things that say, 4 o'clock international hours there?
Yes, but this question, Mr. Harrison's produced a booklet, and there's a letter in this, a private and confidential letter, which was written to the Board of Trade, more or less slamming the Mount Temple and requesting that you'd put that in, hadn't you?
I regret that Mr. Ivan appears completely to have misunderstood what he called the booklet which I had produced. You spoke initially of Captain Stanley Law.
Yep.
He had a number of original documents which he had kept from those days. He came to the MMSA, my association, of which he'd been a member for 67 years, and he asked for our help when a certain book was produced.
And how long ago was this?
When he came here, 4 years ago, when the book announced to them.
So it's taken you 4 years to produce this document, attempting to clear his name. And I'm not being rude when I say attempting, but this is the purpose of which is to clear his name.
Exactly. The timing of it, and he's just died, hasn't he? That's pure coincidence. The timing of the publication of an article, and the booklet is only subsidiary to this article, is to be a month before the anniversary of the 50th anniversary of the Titanic.
Well, but Sir Ivan, would you not agree that, for the interest of truth, if there is any possible doubt that Stanley Lord was wrongly accused of it, it should be investigated?
If he was,
yes.
If he was, yes. But what Mr. Harrison has admitted to tell you, that he produced all, or nearly all, of the letters that Captain Lord had written and received about this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But one was omitted, the letter that Captain Lord wrote to Captain Roston about the Mount Temple. Now, I sailed for many years with Captain Roston in several ships, and I know he received this letter.
Did you know that?
Well, I don't. All I was saying is that official capacity, Sir Ivan
has been associated with the background of this for 4 years. And if he had knowledge of such a letter, and in fact he had the text of it, it would have helped us all very much and saved some of your time.
Oh, don't worry about my time, I get paid.
You say 4 years, 50 years. I was 42 and a half years in Cunard and White Star ships. And with the people, the senior officers in the White Star, who had all been there in the White Star line at the time of the Titanic, you realized how often this topic of conversation cropped up.
Yes.
And I've also carried with me all the time at sea the official inquiry of the British and the publication put out for the American investigation.
Both of these, even Mr. Harrison, both of these inquiries were pretty anti-Stanley Lord, weren't they? Even if that's not very... Well, now, why did you... I don't think any of us will ever understand unless we're seagoing there and there's real evidence, but why did you decide in the first place to do this in your capacity as a General Secretary?
Because for certainly in the last 4 years, there have been an increasing number of books and articles published which battened, in a sense, on the legend that the Californian was within 5.
But have you any real reasons or insight to believe that Stanley Lord had been wronged?
Captain Lord came to me as a member, and my job as a General Secretary is always to look rather skeptically at any problem which is put to me by a member. But on examination of all the facts, which were fully reported to my council, of which Sir Ivan was a member, over the past 4 years, it was agreed, and my council, observing shipmasters, agreed that this article should be published. It was prepared some months ago, and was before them in January.
Sir Ivan, may I say now that last December, the Council of the Mercantile Marine Service Association, they'd had this thing for 3 years, up and down, and they decided to take a vote on it. And by a great majority, by a big majority, 13-2, I think, with one abstention, they decided to throw it out, and they didn't want to hear any more about it.
Well, I didn't get permission to publish it.
So that in the February meeting, by a majority of 14-4, I was given permission.
You were quite right, but
If that was a considered petition, and not why...
You said the council, but I'd like to get the thing straight, what the council really thought. Last December, Mr. Harrison then balloted all the members, you see, all the members of the council. And of course, as you know, our council members are scattered all over the world, some of them. And the ones who are retired live in Jersey and everywhere else. And that's how did get a majority, and he came on. But my point today is now, why is he dragging this poor Captain Moore and a ship, the Mount Temple, in?
I don't think
you have.
Not that, as I said earlier, and I'm amazed that Sir Ivan should have made such a suggestion.
In your book.
Thank you both very much indeed. I told you before we started that this was a very good call.
The recording which follows is an extract from the Associated Television feature, Fair Play, introduced by Edgar Lustgarten, first transmitted on 11th March, 1964.
When a man who died 2 years ago got fair play in his lifetime. This man, Captain Stanley Lord, who has been blamed for the loss of hundreds of lives on board the Titanic. We can see this story that it is an professional body, the Mercantile Marine Service Association, are going to ask the Ministry of Transport to reopen the inquiry into the Titanic disaster to coincide with the publication of a book this autumn, which, if it's accepted, clears Captain Lord. You remember the Titanic was the most advanced ship of her day. In particular, she was, quote, unsinkable, unquote. But on her maiden voyage, what happened? Tragedy. At 11:40 p.m. on April the 14th, 1912, she hit an iceberg, which ripped open 300 feet of her side. She took only 90 minutes to sink without trace. There were not enough lifeboats. There were no immediate rescue ships. Out of the 2,200 passengers and crew, there were only 700 left to be pulled aboard the first ship to arrive. So 1,500 died that night in the Atlantic. The question is whether or not Captain Lord's ship could have saved some or all. His ship was the Californian. She was in the area that night. How near was she, and how mobile? Was she the ship that could have done something but did nothing? The ship that the passengers and crew of the sinking Titanic watched with useless hope throughout their 90-minute hell. But that ship never moved. The captain's only surviving relative is his son, Mr. Stanley Lord. We asked him, could that have been your father's ship?
No. Most emphatically no. If anybody has known my father as I have over the years, it was completely fond of his nature to do such a thing. He would never spare himself at all. If he'd been waiting in the middle of the night to go to the assistance of anybody, let alone the Titanic, he would put all speed ahead and done all he possibly could to get there in the very shortest time. Knowing him as I did over the years, it's completely foreign to his nature to do such a thing.
However, officialdom disagreed. Both inquiries in America and London said the Californian was the ship that did nothing.
She could have pushed through the ice to the open water without any serious risk, and so would come to the assistance of the Titanic. Had she done so, she might have saved many, if not all of the lives that were lost.
And the world condemned Captain Lord, almost everything written about the Titanic since then has labelled him the guilty man. Some were kind. They just called him negligent. Others cruel. They called him a seaborne murderer. And others libelous. They said he was stinking drunk, whilst 1,500 died in agony nearby. He always protested his innocence. This was part of a recording made just before his death.
No, I think that had a dirty news. It was all this favor. Was Lord to blame or was he not to blame?
The Mercantile Marine Services Association offers fresh evidence to clear his name. The inquiry found the Californian was only 6 miles away and should have helped. The association claims that was another ship. The Californian was 25 miles away, stationary in ice, and could not have helped. Mr. Harrison, you're the General Secretary of the association and a friend of Captain Lord. What makes you so convinced of his innocence in this matter?
Unfortunately, the British inquiry did not properly examine the facts of the case. There is sufficient evidence to show that the ship seen from the Titanic could never have been the Californian. She came in the wrong direction, at the wrong time, on the wrong courses, and there is absolutely no doubt at all that the Californian was 25 miles away.
Was this evidence before the British inquiry?
It was before they chose them to take it, but more could have been given. Captain Lord was not charged in any way, he was not properly represented, and his case went absolutely by default.
Captain Bennett, you're an ex-naval captain, and you have written a book called By Human Error. And in this book you say that Captain Lord's action will always be amongst the most inexplicable of human mistakes. Do you stand by that statement, Captain Bennett? Yes. For 3 general reasons. First, as Mr. Harrison has made clear, there were 2 independent inquiries, one in Britain and one in America, both of which came to the same general conclusions about the Californian. The second point is this. If, as Mr. Harrison holds, there was another ship, we are faced with the question that there must have been 2 ships, one in sight from the Titanic and one from the Californian. It seems to me extraordinary that after 50 years, those ships have never been identified. That no member of their crew of the one ship hasn't been identified. It's the ship that was in view from the two. That's right. Well, that is another way of putting it. Yes. Even if it's only one ship, it's extraordinary that no member of the crew has come forward to identify with all the powers of the press. Well, before you go on to your first one, Captain Bennett, I'll ask Mr. Harrison if he'd like to deal with those 2 things. They were very much ready for the 2 inquiries, and the ship was never been identified.
The American inquiry was a non-technical one. The British inquiry was a technical one. The techniques there again. Captain Lord was not represented, and his case was not properly put.
Who presided over the British inquiry?
Lord Lundy. Lord Lundy, yes, he was a great judge. He was a great judge. We asked Captain Bennett whether, in fact, before putting so much faith in the British inquiry findings, he has read the transcript of Edmund.
The full answer is yes.
In that case, he must have spent an awful lot of time doing it. And having read that, did he feel that Captain Lord's case was properly put?
This is a very difficult question that I can answer from reading the transcript as opposed to being present at the inquiry itself.
I will accept that point. But I think we're losing sight here of what is the principal issue. And the principle here is that Captain Lord was condemned by this inquiry without proper representation and was denied any right of appeal. We are fighting this case because, as far as we are concerned, we think it's a travesty of justice. The man should not be allowed right of appeal. And I've asked Captain Bennett whether he has any principle at all, or I must say any principles, which would support the use of a biased inquiry finding by an
We've very little time left, Captain Bennett. Would you like to put your third point? Or would you say that my third argument is it is not questioned that the Californians saw rockets. If they were not the Titanic, whose were they? May I also point out they were not the Titanic. Captain Lord made in the circumstances, regrettable mistake of taking no action on those rockets. I'm afraid I've now got to close the discussion because we're running out of time. I do find it very curious and also very moving that the right of fair play for a man does survive his death, because it can make no difference now to Captain Lord. And yet there are people, and I'm very glad to see it, who want to right an injustice. If an injustice was done to him, I don't know, that occurred in his lifetime, and now he's dead. Goodbye now.
From today, BBC Home Service, introduced by Jack DeManio, and tonight, BBC Television with Kenneth Alsop, 5th February, 1965.
The Titanic sank with a loss of 1,500 lives after hitting an iceberg. At the subsequent courts of inquiry, Captain Stanley Lord, who was master of the cargo liner Californian, was censured for not going to the rescue of the stricken ship. And now, in a bid to clear his name, the Mercantile Marine Service Association of Liverpool is presenting a petition to the Board of Trade for a new inquiry. Well, John Healy saw Mr. Leslie Harrison, the secretary of the association.
The Titanic went down 3 years since Captain Lord died. Why are you still waiting, Miss Bertel?
Because he died confident that we would clear his name. And in any case, it's a duty on us as a professional organization to continue work which we started.
Captain Lord was a man who was violently criticized. Did he die an embittered man?
No, he was armored in his absolute integrity, and the fact that those who knew him well, knew that he was innocent of this charge, enabled him to carry on. He was a man of fantastic character and of absolute integrity. To that extent, he was able to live with this really monstrous charge, and to live to the age of 84 with a mind unclouded and absolutely clear.
In effect, you're asking the Board of Trade to reopen a 53-year-old inquiry. Are there witnesses who are still alive?
Witnesses are not necessary. All the evidence which is required is available in the proceedings of the American and the British inquiries.
Is there a precedent for reopening an inquiry after half a century?
Not that I know of.
Now, this petition argues that Captain Lord didn't have a chance to defend himself, and it also gives a massive detail about times, seeking to prove by the clock that the Californian couldn't have been the ship that the Titanic saw, and the Titanic couldn't have been the ship the Californian saw. This being so, what happened to these other ships? Because they vanished like phantoms.
One that might have been the ship seen from the Californian was later seen in the vicinity of the Titanic's wreckage. But so far as the other ships are concerned, there's no duty on Captain Lord to produce that as evidence. It's enough for us, and it was enough for him, that the Californian could not have been the ship seen from the Titanic and couldn't have helped in any way.
The thing that baffles me about this ghastly, fascinating night on the North Atlantic, Sunday, April 14, 1912, is that the watch of the Californian saw rockets being fired a few miles away, and through the night, 3 messages were sent to Captain Lord, who was resting at the time, warning him that this was happening, and apparently he did nothing at all about it.
I don't think it was a question of his being warned that rockets were seen. The reports he received, he could regard merely as being negative reports, calling for no action. They were, first of all, that a ship which hadn't responded to more signals was steaming away, and the last message of all, that in fact she had gone out of sight.
Your case seems to be that it wasn't the Titanic's rockets that the Californian saw. Is there any evidence at all that another ship was firing rockets that night? Rockets in the same area, around about the same time?
Well, so far as we are concerned, the key point is that the rockets seen from the Californian started sometime after those which were sent up from the Titanic. Therefore, they could not be the same series of rockets. And incidentally, the Titanic was sending up distress rockets, explosive rockets, whereas the lights seen from the Californian were more in the nature of Roman candles or Bavaria lights.
How confident are you that you're going to be able to clear his name?
100%.
From ITV's news scene, 23rd May, 1967.
Oh God, power and glory, forever and ever. Amen.
A clip of the sinking of the Titanic from the film A Night to Remember, which you probably saw on Granada earlier this evening. For one man portrayed in that film, that particular night threw a shadow across the whole of the rest of his life. He was Captain Stanley Lord, the master of the Californian, who was accused by the official Board of Inquiry into the sinking of having been responsible for 1,500 deaths of passengers by refusing to go to their assistance. This is how Captain Lord was portrayed in that film.
What's the matter with him? Is he blind?
Yes. Maybe I better tell the captain.
His death 5 years ago, Captain Lord always claimed that his ship was never within sight of the stricken Titanic, and that the deaths of the passengers could in no way be considered his responsibility. Since Captain Lord's death, the fight to clear his name has been carried on by the Mercantile Marine Service Association, which could fairly be called the Sea Captain Trade Union. Later this year, it's their intention to present new evidence to the Board of Trade to clear Captain Lord. Well, earlier this evening, Mike Scott spoke to the General Secretary, and his name is Mr. Leslie Harrison.
Mr. Harrison, will the new evidence you are going to present to the Board of Trade clear definitely Captain Lord's name?
Well, that is entirely up to the Board of Trade, but in our view, it will demolish the primary argument against the Californian, and that is that rockets were seen, which people hold were from the Titanic.
You can, in your view, definitely prove that the rockets seen from the Californian Captain Lord's ship were not coming from the
We think
Titanic.
so, on a timing basis. It started much too late.
Will you be able to go further and name the ship that was seen from the Titanic that didn't come to its aid?
I would not want to do that until I had absolutely irrefutable and legal proof of it. This, as yet, I haven't got, though I have a fair idea of the ship which was involved.
Now, the Captain Lord we saw in the film tonight was a man who took to his bunk and didn't get out of it when presented with a possible emergency. He merely said, flash some Morse at them and see if you can find out a bit more. How do you disagree with that portrait?
Well, it's absolutely contrary to what actually happened. He was lying on the chart room settee from about 1 o'clock until 4:30 in the morning, fully dressed in uniform and ready for any emergency. None was reported to him.
How do you know that?
Because that was given in evidence in 1912, apart from the fact that I've heard him tell me so many times. His cap was pulled down over his eyes to shield them against the electric light which he left switched on.
Well, why... I mean, obviously, Captain Lord had a need to prove himself innocent. Why are you so sure that the ship seen from the Titanic was not Captain Lord's ship?
Well, you've only got to look at the film which we've just seen. There are two particular points which I think must have occurred to a number of people, but certainly never did to those who held the inquiry in 1912. First point is this. The two lookouts are looking out into a pitch-black night.
This is on the Titanic?
On the Titanic.
Yes.
And they see at 3/4 of a mile an unlighted iceberg. Well, if the Californian, as the film maintains, was stopped only 5 miles away from that iceberg, why on earth couldn't they see her? She was lit up like a Christmas tree. Second point is this. In the first 45 minutes after the Titanic hit the iceberg, and this again you see in the film, the master and officers are just deciding that, in fact, she's going to sink. In those 45 minutes, she could have steamed, up to 10 or 15 miles, because although she was holed and was going to founder eventually...
It wasn't a fast sinking,
No,
yes.
the damage was calculated as being 300 feet long, a gash 300 feet long, about 3/4 of an inch wide in parts. So she could have been steamed in any direction. Why didn't she go to the Californian, if the Californian indeed was only 5 miles away? The simple reason that the Californian wasn't only 5 miles away. No ship was. The ship that they saw came into sight much later, when the Titanic was irrevocably immobilized.
Mr. Leslie Harrison talking to Mike Scott. And now over to Jeff Galley with the Northern News.
The sinking of the Titanic in 1912 reopened. 1,490 people were lost in the disaster, and now the Wallasey-based Mercantile Marine Service Association want the Board of Trade to look at the facts again. Tony Miller reports.
No, I think I had a dirty deal. It all turned out as it happened very well. There's always this stigma. Was Lord to blame or was he not to blame?
These are the words of a dead man, the late Captain Stanley Lord, master of the liner the California, who at the public inquiry was censured for allegedly failing to go to the rescue of passengers and crew of the Titanic. Captain Lord died 6 years ago, claiming that his ship wasn't the nearest. Now today, there is apparently new evidence that will support Captain Lord's claim. The man who's come up with the new information is Mr. Leslie Harrison, General Secretary of the Mercantile Marine Service Association. Mr. Harrison, what is this new evidence?
Well, basically, it deals with the timing of rockets fired from the Titanic and the liner's heading as she lay sinking. Both these are essential points in the case against Captain Lord, and if they're decided in his favor, then the case against him collapses.
Where did you get this information?
It's in a book written by one of the Titanic survivors, a Mr. Lawrence Beasley.
Why has it only come to light now?
It has not come to light now, but it was only within the last few years that its significance became apparent. And if the Board of Trade had accepted our earlier petition in 1965, we would never have had to use it.
From the Merchant Navy programme with Malcolm Billings.
The inquiry into the sinking of the Titanic, the liner which sank on its maiden voyage in mid-Atlantic in April 1912 after hitting an iceberg. Nearly 1,500 people died. A petition sent to the President of the Board of Trade today challenges the conclusion of the 1912 inquiry that most, if not all, of the lives might have been saved if a nearby ship, the Californian, had heeded the Titanic's distress rockets. The organisers of the petition, the Mercantile Marine Services Association, want a new inquiry into the behaviour of the Californian's master, Captain Lord. But why now, over 50 years after the disaster and 6 years after Captain Lord's death? Trahan Jones reports.
The Titanic left Southampton for her maiden voyage to New York on April the 10th, 1912. She was a sixth of a mile long and 11 stories high, the biggest ship of her time. She was believed unsinkable. All went well until she received radio warning of icebergs. One was spotted 3/4 of a mile ahead, but too close to avoid, and at 11:40 that night, the Titanic hit it at full speed. 2 hours and 20 minutes later, she was sunk. Only 711 people survived. The dispute over the Californian is over what she was doing while the Titanic was sinking. Rockets were seen by the Californian, but today's question is, did they come from this crippled ship? Captain Lord of the Californian said at the inquiry in 1912 that he was 20 miles away from the Titanic, and not 5 as the official report claimed. The report rejected Captain Lord's evidence. It said a ship seen by survivors from the Titanic must have been the Californian. Today's petition contains fresh evidence about the Californian, brought to light in the papers of an eyewitness now dead. They suggest that there may have been other identified ships in the area. Captain Lord kept silent for 40 years. We asked his son if the issue had followed him in all that time.
Well, it depicted him in quite an incorrect light. I haven't seen the film, I believe it shows him going to bed and making himself very snug, which of course was the very last thing he did do.